Saturday night, everybody. This is Arav Desai with the tropical update for October 6, 2018. And we have quite a bit to talk about today in the tropics, so let's get right into it. Now, you can see on the satellite for the Pacific, the East Pacific, and the Atlantic Ocean that we do have one tropical storm and one hurricane active at the moment. We have Tropical Storm Leslie in the Central Atlantic, and we have Major Hurricane Sergio in the East Pacific. We also have Potential Tropical Cyclone 14 just north of Honduras in the Caribbean Sea. And if we also take a look at the National Hurricane Center site, you can see there's another area, Invest 92L, in the far eastern Atlantic, with only a 30% chance right now of development over the next 5 days. And actually, it may impact some land, though, as it is heading east and it is heading towards the northern African region and Spain. But by then, it probably would not be tropical anymore, as usually tropical storms do not hit Spain. It has happened before, but it's very unlikely. But there is still a slight possibility. And if we also take a look, we do have our potential tropical cyclone 14 with a 100% chance of development within the next 48 hours and 5 days. So development of this storm is basically certain at this point. But if we take a look first, taking a look at the East Pacific, you can see we have Hurricane Sergio, which has re-strengthened. It was a Category 3 hurricane with winds of 115 miles per hour. Now it has re-strengthened to 125 miles per hour, as it had gone through an eyewall replacement cycle. As you can see, the eye was pretty wobbly several hours ago. However, it has become more concentric and cleared out since then. And it's definitely keeping its act together. It will probably start weakening soon, though, as it does encounter some wind shear and some cooler waters as it starts to head west, and then a sharp, basically 45-degree angle, a turn northeast, and then it will basically be making a beeline right towards the Baja California coast, and it will be approaching that region as a tropical storm. If you do take a look at the track models, all the models are in agreement, basically having it making landfall somewhere here on the Baja California peninsula. And if we take a look at the intensity forecast, you can see that it's a similar situation with the intensity, where most of the models are in agreement that it will probably be a tropical storm, most likely by the time it does make landfall on the Baja Peninsula. Now, exactly how strong it will be, they're still unsure of, as it could be barely a tropical storm, maybe even a depression, or it could be a strong tropical storm, almost a hurricane. So they're still uncertain on that, but areas in the Baja Peninsula should be paying attention to this system and watching it closely. In the Atlantic, we have Tropical Storm Leslie still. It's been hanging around for several days now. It's been almost 2 weeks since it formed now, and it's going to be hanging around for several more days to come. There's really nothing that's stopping it from, nothing that's going to be destroying it or ripping it apart, as the wind shear is relatively low. It's not ideal, but it is lower. It's low enough to sustain a tropical storm. And the water temperatures are moderate. They are not that warm, but again, they are warm enough to sustain the storm. And the steering currents are weak, so it's going to continue to just meander through the Atlantic for several days to come. It is heading in the east direction, though southeast actually. You can see on the projected path here, you can see that it's going to start heading south, and then it will start heading north again, though, once it reaches the 5-day mark. And it could eventually impact Spain, most likely as an extratropical cyclone. So that region should at least be watching this system over the next several days to see what it does. And taking a look now at the main story for today, which will be potential tropical cyclone 14, which is just off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula and Central America. You can see on the satellite imagery that it's still very disorganized at the moment. However, it is definitely showing some heavy thunderstorm activity, and it is forecast to develop into a tropical depression or even a tropical storm any moment now. And the reason that it's called a potential tropical cyclone, not just an invest like most disturbances are titled, is because the NHC has had a new system in the past that was released a couple years ago, I believe, where they now designate invest areas of investigation that are near land as potential tropical cyclones, And what that basically does is it allows them to be able to issue watches and warnings for a developing tropical cyclone, so that the areas that may be impacted by the cyclone can make preparations. If you take a look at the watches and warnings, you can see that there is a tropical storm watch up for the eastern Yucatan Peninsula, and tropical storm warnings are up for portions of western Cuba and the Cayman Islands. And if you do take a look at the projected path for potential tropical cyclone 14, and if it did get a name, which it probably will, then it would be named Michael, the M storm. And you can see that the path does take it basically due north, a little bit west over the next 3-4 days, and then it starts to head east, and landfall is forecast to be somewhere between Alabama and the Big Bend region of the Florida Panhandle as a pretty strong tropical storm. And then, of course, it would weaken as it interacts with land. And then whatever is left of it, the remnants would be heading towards the Mid-Atlantic and the northeast. Now, if you take a look at the wind shear map, you can see that right now it is under some very heavy wind shear of 50 knots. And so that's the reason it's not able to develop at the moment, as usually you need at least 20 knots or less of wind shear for tropical cyclone development, so 50 knots is way above that threshold, and so at least for the next day or so, it's not going to be developing. However, the wind shear will be decreasing throughout the region over the next couple of days, and then it is likely that it will be developing then, and it could definitely strengthen quite a bit as the waters in the Gulf of Mexico are very warm. If you take a look at the sea surface temperatures right now, you can see that the waters in the Gulf of Mexico are quite warm, indicated by these dark orange and light red colors. These indicate temperatures of around 31 degrees Celsius. And if you convert that to Fahrenheit, that would be about 90 degrees Fahrenheit, a little bit, maybe 88 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So definitely some very hot water temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico, and definitely enough to sustain tropical cyclone development and strengthening. So as this thing does start to head north into the more favorable environment, it is forecast to develop and to strengthen quite a bit. If you take a look at the model tracks, the forecast model, the guidance, you can see that almost all the models are basically in agreement with having this thing head basically due north and over the next several days. And then it will be eventually curving a little bit to the east and most likely making landfall somewhere here along the Florida Panhandle. And then the remnants of the system would be moving somewhere here throughout the southeast and up into the Mid-Atlantic and New England region. And taking a look at the intensity, you can see that most of the models do have it developing, however, they do have it staying in tropical storm strength range. Only a couple models, only 2 models at the moment, do have it reaching hurricane strength or more. But there is definitely the potential that this thing could become a hurricane, as it has several days over warm waters and low wind shear. And if you take a look back at the path, you can see that by the time it gets around Monday morning, it will still only be around next to western Cuba. This thing is not going to be moving fast anytime soon. So that will allow it to strengthen. It'll spend a lot of time over these warm waters and this favorable environment. It's not forecast to make landfall until Wednesday afternoon, so there's definitely plenty of time for this thing to strengthen. And so areas on the Gulf Coast that are in this cone, and even areas that are even slightly outside of the cone, like in the Florida Peninsula and areas of Louisiana, should also be watching this system and keeping track of it over the next several days. Now, taking a look at the main forecasting models, the European model ECMWF, the latest 12Z run does show what would become Michael, which is probably most likely going to become Michael, forming here just off the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. And then it will be heading a little bit east, and it will be approaching Louisiana. However, then it will be curving east, and then it will be heading into the Florida Panhandle, and this will be as a relatively strong tropical storm, 992 millibars. That would indicate probably a tropical storm with around 60-65 mile an hour winds. And then The whatever is left of the storm at that moment will be heading through the Carolinas, bringing more rain to that region that they definitely don't need after all the rain that Florence dumped. Then it will be heading out to sea after that. However, that's still pretty far out. That's probably 168 hours from now. So we're unsure about that. And you can also see that it does also have Leslie approaching, heading south of the Azores Islands in day 6. And so it will be heading in this general direction towards areas of southern Europe. If we take a look at the GFS model now to compare, the GFS model again also has development of Michael in the far western Caribbean Sea, but it has development a little bit further west than, or a little bit further east, I should say, than the European model, and it has more rapid strengthening. Already has it as a strong tropical storm as it just starts to just enter the Gulf of Mexico, and then as it heads further, excuse me, as it heads further north, it has it rapidly strengthening, even has it approaching maybe Category 2 status. 973 millibar tropical or 973 millibar storm would probably equate to a low end Category 2. So this thing definitely could be a pretty serious threat. And as um, it approaches the Alabama area, it even drops to 969 millibars on the GFS, and that would be a moderate Category 2. That'd be quite a significant storm for that region. So they definitely should be paying attention and keeping updated with the latest on the potential tropical cyclone. And then after that, the GFS does have it making landfall in Alabama, and the remnants do travel across the northeast region. If we compare that with the FV3 GFS, which is the new test run, the test model of the GFS, the upgraded version, you can see that that model actually has it coming in even further west. And it has a weaker storm, however, 981 millibars peaking. I think that is probably more realistic. I don't think that it's going to develop, it's not going to strengthen that much. The potential is there, but I could definitely see this thing coming in as probably a moderate higher to high end Category 1 hurricane into Alabama. And then, of course, again, the remnants do head up into the northeast regions of Pennsylvania, bringing more rain there that they don't need either. And now if we take a look at the NAM model, if I go back to the 0Z, the NAM model is a short range model. It's not a tropical model, but you can still use it for short range to see what it shows. And the NAM model does have Michael forming here in the southwestern Caribbean. And as you can see, as it comes into the frame, you can see that it has a pretty strong hurricane. This would be Category 2 hurricane approaching the Florida Panhandle, but this does end at hour 84, so past that we can't see what's going on. But again, most of the models do have at least a strong tropical storm just south of the Florida Panhandle. So these areas should definitely be watching the system to see what goes on in the future. Now taking a look just at the local forecast, the northeast region, you can see there are some pretty heavy thunderstorms. There have been some flash flood warnings posted for areas of southwestern New York and western Pennsylvania and Ohio with these thunderstorms. However, they should be dying out relatively soon, and they probably will be dying out before they get to the New York metropolitan area and areas of Philly and in New Jersey. And if you take a look at the next few days for the GFS, you can see that it does stay dry. However, it will be cloudy for tomorrow, but it should stay dry. There may be a chance of some pop-up showers for Sunday evening. And then Tuesday, it does look also dry. Wednesday, we do have those remnants of will be Michael coming through the region, and that will be dumping some heavy rain from Thursday into Friday. And for the temperatures, things look to be staying warm. We'll be back in the 80s tomorrow, cooling down a bit to 70 for Monday, but then back into the upper 70s and 80s for Tuesday and Wednesday. But after Thursday and onwards, things do look to cool down once again, which is good news. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.